You know, when you think about Game of Thrones, there are so many what ifs, but there's one that really stands out to me. What if the dragon and the wolf, two of the most powerful forces in the story, had united way, way sooner? Not at the end of their story, but right near the very beginning.
Yeah, what if the Starks of Winterfell and Daenerys Targaryen teamed up right in the middle of the War of the Five Kings? I mean, think about it. Would that have actually saved the Seven Kingdoms? Or could it have been even worse? Let's really dig into this. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to trace the ripple effects of this one single change. First, we'll look at how this alliance of ice and fire would even come together. Then, we'll see how it could have completely rewritten the Red Wedding. Yeah, that Red Wedding. We'll also see what it meant for the Starks. You know, how the pack survives. After that, we'll shift to the real war, the War for the Dawn. And finally, we'll get to the big one, what all of this would have meant for the Dragon Queen herself.
Okay, so to really get this, we have to rewind a bit. Picture it. Westeros is just tearing itself apart, right? The War of the Five Kings is in full swing. You've got Robb Stark, the young wolf, leading his army south to get revenge for his father. And at the exact same time, all the way across the Narrow Sea, Daenerys Targaryen is just starting her incredible rise to power over in Essos.
Now, our whole scenario, this whole what if, it all comes down to one single game-changing move. Just imagine if Robb Stark, or maybe one of his smarter advisors, decided to make a really bold play. Instead of just fighting south, they send a ship, an envoy, all the way to Essos. And they reach out to the last Targaryen with an offer, an alliance. And you know what? Strategically, it's a perfect fit. I mean, it's brilliant. Think about it. Daenerys, she has the name, the Targaryen name. But to everyone in Westeros, she's basically a foreigner. The Starks? They can offer her something she desperately needs. Legitimacy. A real foothold on the continent. And what does she offer in return? Well, just the ultimate game changer. Dragons. And right away, this alliance has a huge, huge consequence. It completely rewrites one of the most traumatic events in the entire series.
And I know what you're thinking. That's a weird question, right? How could dragons possibly prevent a wedding? What do giant fire-breathing monsters have to do with a feast? Well, when you're talking about politics and power in Westeros, it turns out they have everything to do with it.
So let's not forget Robb Stark was an absolute genius on the battlefield. He ran circles around the Lannisters, winning battle after battle. But here's the thing. Winning battles wasn't enough. He was totally isolated strategically. He was up against the incredible wealth and political machine of Tywin Lannister, the guy who was basically running the whole show from the Iron Throne.
Okay, so here's how everything changes. The second word gets out, the second, that the Starks are allied with a Targaryen who has dragons, the whole political map of Westeros just gets redrawn. Suddenly, a Lannister victory isn't a sure bet anymore. And what do guys like Walder Frey and Roose Bolton do? They're opportunists. They only betrayed Robb because they wanted to be on the winning side. Now, they'd think twice. The bottom line is, the Red Wedding probably never happens.
So winning the war is a huge deal, obviously. But the impact here goes so much deeper than that. It gets personal. It changes the fate of the Stark family itself. I mean, the real tragedy of the Starks, the thing that hits so hard, is how their pack was just shattered. You had Sansa, a prisoner of the Lannisters, and then the Boltons. Arya, lost, alone, everyone thinking she was dead. Bran, forced to go beyond the wall, hunted. And Robb, well, we know what happened to Robb. They were just scattered to the four winds. But in this timeline, averted. Just gone. If the North is victorious, if it's stable, Winterfell probably never falls to the Boltons, which means Ramsay Bolton never, ever gets his hands on Sansa. The family isn't broken, they aren't scattered. The pack, it could have survived. Together.
Okay, but as important as the Starks are, this alliance changes something even bigger. It changes the course of a much, much larger war. It forces everyone to pivot, to stop focusing on their petty squabbles and look at the real threat looming over all of them.
Because, let's be honest, the real threat in Game of Thrones was never who sat on the Iron Throne. It was the Night King. While all these great houses were fighting over a metal chair, an entire army of the dead was building in the north, getting ready to wipe out every living thing. So in the show we saw, the fight against the dead was this desperate last-ditch defense at Winterfell, right? It was chaos. But in our new timeline, It's a totally different story. You have a united Stark Targaryen front. They're going to take this threat seriously and way earlier. So instead of just waiting for the Night King to knock on their door, they could take the fight to him. Can you imagine? An aggressive campaign using dragons to hit the army of the dead at its heart, beyond the wall.
And all of this, it brings us to our final ripple. And this might just be the most debated part of the entire show. We're talking about the fate of Daenerys Targaryen.
Look, her turn at the end, it was shocking. It was controversial. A lot of people hated it. But the big question is, was it inevitable? Did she have to end up that way? Well, this early alliance, it makes a pretty compelling case that maybe it wasn't. So let's just look at the political math here for a second. The Starks, especially under Robb, never wanted the Iron Throne. What did they want? An independent North. That's it. And Daenerys? She wanted to rule the Seven Kingdoms. See? This alliance creates a perfect compromise. Both sides get exactly what they want. You've got a foundation for real respect, real stability.
Remember what happened in the show. Daenerys finally gets to Westeros, and it's just loss after loss after loss. She loses her advisors, she loses her friends, she loses 2 of her dragons, her children. All that isolation, all that grief, it fueled her paranoia. But just, what if? What if she had arrived and found powerful, loyal allies already waiting for her in the Starks? Having real partners, not just people who bend the knee. That might have been the thing that grounded her. It might have been enough to stop that descent into tyranny. Because what we're really talking about here is balance, something Westeros rarely, if ever, sees. The combination of that stubborn Stark honor with Targaryen power, it could have brought genuine balance to the Seven Kingdoms. Power in that world is it's a poison. Isolated rulers always seem to fall into paranoia and tyranny. But this partnership, this true alliance of ice and fire, as equals, that could have been the anchor Daenerys needed to fight off that fire and blood impulse and actually, heal the realm.
So just stop and think about it for a second. In this new timeline, the Lannisters are dealt with early. The Red Wedding never happens. The Night King decisively defeated by a united Westeros with dragons. It's a completely different history and a whole lot less tragic.
But, of course, that leaves us with the one big question, doesn't it? Could they have actually found this balance? Was this path to victory a real possibility? Something that was only missed by a few bad choices? Or is the world of Game of Thrones just fundamentally broken? A place that was always destined for fire and blood? Something to think about, for sure.